Well, here we are for the January session of the Big Book Club. So thank you so much for everybody for joining. This is our third session all told, I think. Alex, if you bring up the welcome page, we'll cover what we're going to go over today. So today we're all about principles. So there's actually another chapter of the book that we didn't cover last time that we've kind of skipped over. There is a reason for that. We're going to come back to it. But following the discussion that we did have in November, principles just seemed like really the logical place to start. And if anybody caught any of the big conference material where we did touch on some of this, it was a good session. I recommend it. There is a little bit of a story on the principles. So we've landed on 14, and we are going to have a little bit of a recap for everybody in a couple of minutes about what they are, and a little bit that will touch a little bit on why those ones, where did they come from. So the principles are really helpful. As it says here, it helps us communicate what big is and a little bit what it isn't by implication, I guess. It just helps understand and inform when we're implementing big as what basis we're doing it for. We can engage stakeholders on their readiness to improve strategy delivery or leverage the big framework. And then it links very nicely into the components, which is a huge part of big. That's the chapter following principles. We will be covering that in some detail. We'll be covering that. There's 8 components. We'll be covering 4 and 4 because they are massively central to the big concept. But how do we get up to 14? So I think it was a long, hard process of debate and consensus. And in the interest of full disclosure, this was before my time, so David and Alex can sort of chip in on this. But basically, it started with a lot of brainstorming. I believe we're up to over 80 at one point. Is that right? And then through a sort of really quite rigorous process of honing, we went through sort of grouping them and reducing them to a reasonable number that sort of really honed in on those concepts. Alex, David, do you have anything more to add about how and why we landed on 14 from the original 80 plus?
Well, I guess what we did with the big stuff was start off in a series of brain dumping, and came up with a view of what our governance nodes were, how we'd operate governance, and we started bottom up, and then thought, well, this is a whole load of disconnected gibberish. I think it's probably a good idea to pull out the essence of this and try and make it a bit more communicable. So we asked a whole range of people to brainstorm what they thought a good big principle was, and we produced 80 something comments for what people thought a good principle was. And through debate and discussion, we condensed and honed that down and got to 14. So some of the principles are quite simplistic, but they cover a whole bunch of stuff. And I think we're nearly there. I think some groups have like 5 or 6, others have 15 or 20. But big's a broad subject, so we stopped trying to narrow it down too much further when we got to 14. Thought let's not kill ourselves too much. Maybe if we had ChatGPT when we did it, we could have magically turned it into 6 that were perfect, but we didn't. So this is where we are today.
Yeah, it's very much, you have multiple principles which are all flavors of the same thing. So you can have one overarching principle which covers all of them. So I think there was an awful lot of that sort of grouping, I would describe it as.
We use the principles in the big readiness model. So we've did a lot more work on the principles when trying to talk to people about how to use the principles to understand their organization state. So actually, while the principles chapter is dead useful and it describes all the principles and all that sort of stuff. The readiness model has points in it which elaborate each principle further, with some example good statements and some example bad statements, which will help people understand what their organization state is. And that's the key purpose of the principles. It's not to be clever or academic. It's to try and help organizations engage their organizations about business integrated governance, but do it through a non-threatening, non-emotive way. So let's discuss how organization maps to this principle is a little bit more easy to discuss than our strategy alignment is, cobblers.
Yeah, and I think it's easier if the organisation wants to pivot as well. It more than sort of maybe rebuild. Sometimes that's an easier conversation to help a pivot. Are we aligned? Are we less aligned? What would a closer alignment look like? But we'll get into that when we start our debate. Alex, if you want to move forward to the next slide, please.